Hello everyone and welcome to today's lecture for CS303 operating systems. So this is chapter number 5. We are still talking about CPU scheduling, and within chapter number 5 this is lecture 4. So up till now we have seen what CPU scheduling is, why scheduling is necessary, what are some of the metrics or parameters that we need to monitor and measure, for various scheduling algorithms. And then we looked at some of those scheduling algorithms. We looked at first come first serve, then shortest job first, then shortest remaining time first, preemptive, non-preemptive, and then we looked at round robin, right? So, and then also we did some examples. The topic for today's lecture is, as you can see on the title slide, is real-time scheduling. Okay. So essentially, this is a special case of scheduling for real-time systems. Okay. So here, the main goal is to meet the process deadlines. So for each process, some deadline will be assigned. So how the deadline is assigned, it will depend on many factors. But let's say that for each process a deadline has been assigned, which means it has to be finished by that time. So just like you have a deadline for homework submission, right? So what does that mean? It means that you have to submit the homework by that cutoff time. Otherwise, you either lose all the points, that means late submissions are not accepted, or you will face some penalty, maybe a 10% reduction in marks or a 20% reduction in marks. So in the first case, in which your assignment is not considered post a deadline, the process of doing the assignment becomes useless. So similarly, that happens in the case of a process as well. If for some processes, if the results are computed after the deadline, the results are useless. Although for some other processes which are still real time, if the results are computed after the deadline, they are not as useful as they would have been if they were before the deadline, but still they are not totally useless. So the second case is when you get some penalty for your marks, for your late submission. So like that, we can have these two scenarios. So the goal over here is how do we come up with scheduling algorithms for such kind of deadline driven real time systems. So that is the topic for today's lecture. Okay, now I am on slide number 2, real-time scheduling. Okay, that's the title for this. So we recall from chapter 1 where we discussed real-time systems. So there we discussed that in real-time systems, the tasks or the processes that we need to execute, they have got strict timing constraints. Okay. So which means they have a deadline by which the task has to be completed. Okay. Now note that real time does not necessarily mean fast. Okay. So that's a common misconception. It may or may not. Right. So to give you an example, let's say if there's a process, there's a task that needs 5 units of time for execution, right? And let's say it arrives into the system at time t equal to 10, and let's say the deadline of the task is t equal to 20. So once again, the arrival of the task is at t equal to 10, the execution cost of the task is 5 units, and the deadline of the task is t equal to 20. Now, if you look at a non-real time scheduler, it will try to ensure that the task starts as early as possible. Ideally, if it starts at 10 or 11 or 12, as early as possible. Whereas if you look at a real time system, the task can even start at time 15. So because the execution cost is 5 and because the deadline is 20, so as long as the task starts at 15 and as long as there is no preemption, which means that once the task gets the CPU, it has control over the CPU till it finishes execution. So if it gets the CPU at time t equal to 15, takes 5 units, by 20 it's finished. So which means that in a real time system we can delay the execution of this task till time t equal to 15. If we delay it beyond t equal to 15, so if it starts beyond t equal to 15, it will miss the deadline. Okay. So we can execute it at 10, that's fine, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 also. So unlike in a non-real time system, here we can, we can delay the execution of a task as long as it meets the deadline. So real time does not necessarily mean as fast as possible. Now you can ask, why would we want to delay the execution of this task? Well, perhaps there is another task with a shorter deadline. So let's say there is a task in the system with the deadline of 15. So given these two, probably that task with a deadline of 15 should be run first, and therefore we hold on to the execution for the task with the deadline 20. So which means we can delay the execution of tasks so that other tasks can be accommodated with early deadlines. The only catch is we should ensure that the deadline is met. Which in this case, if we assign the task by 15, deadline will be met. So process needs to finish execution before its deadline, else there can be negative consequences, loss of human life, loss of property. So the cost of missing a deadline could be very significant, very serious. Okay. So as an example, braking system of an airplane. So when you press the brake, then there's a command and control system, most likely connected to a computer, which has to ensure that the brake is activated. Now once you press the brake, and then the between that time and the time at which the brake is activated, that is the processing time. Now consider what happens if there is a significant delay between the time that you press the brake and the time that the brake is activated. So if there is a large delay, clearly we have a huge problem. Okay, the runway where you're landing might finish and you've not properly braked. So very, very serious consequences. Okay. Another one, sensor system on the border that keeps track of enemy movements. So looking at a human activity. So there, if there's some human activity, let's say across the border, and you are late to detect it, so clearly you can have an unpleasant situation at the border. So what we're trying to say, looking at both of these examples, some deadline will be set, some reasonable deadline. So which in the first case will ensure that the brakes are pressed before the runway finishes, and in the second system will ensure that you get if there's an enemy movement, you get an alarm within a specified interval, let's say 5 milliseconds, 10 milliseconds, something like that, right? Something which allows you to alert your troops, right? So these are real time systems, and what we're trying to say here is the cost of missing a deadline can be huge. Loss of life, loss of property, loss of expensive equipment. Okay. So that is the our defining property, the hallmark of a real time system. The cost of missing a deadline is huge. Therefore, our primary goal for the scheduling algorithm should be to meet all process deadlines. So scheduling algorithms for real-time systems have one broad goal in mind that they need to shoot for, which is simply to meet all process deadlines, and if possible give a guarantee for meeting deadlines. So maybe you have a mathematical condition saying that if such and such condition or if such and such conditions are satisfied, then we guarantee that all deadlines will be met. So if you can give the guarantee, then that is the best scenario. Okay. So because then it becomes very easy for the engineers while they're accepting the tasks, because whether all deadlines will be met or deadlines will be missed, it depends on many factors. First of all, it depends on how many CPUs you have. Of course, if you have one CPU, can't accommodate a lot. Second, it will depend on what is your process load. Irrespective of how many CPUs you have, if you keep on adding more and more tasks, you will reach a breakpoint, and beyond a specific value, the load of the processes will be much more than the CPUs can handle. So in that case, you start to miss deadlines. Okay. So in that sense, if you have some condition that if the total task load is less than equal to this, then all deadlines will be met. So that kind of thing can be very useful. Of course, coming up with such a condition is a non-trivial problem, NP hard. So only for very simple cases we can come up with these. Okay. Okay, now I am on slide number 3. Title of this slide is real-time CPU scheduling. So here broadly, we can categorize real-time systems into two sort of buckets, two categories, soft and hard. Okay. So the earlier examples that we talked about, they fall in the hard real-time systems category. So which means that the task must be serviced by the deadline, otherwise the results are useless. So it's a binary 0-1. If you service a task before the deadline, its usefulness is 100%, or we can say another way of looking at it is the task is successful if you process it by the deadline. Whereas on the other hand, if you miss the deadline for a hard real-time task or process, right, that means if it finishes after the deadline has elapsed, if deadline is 20, it finishes at 21, for example, in that case the usefulness of that task is 0. So we say the task has failed. Okay. So soft real-time systems are a bit different in the sense that there is some limited relaxation for meeting deadlines. So we need to be careful, limited relaxation, not a whole lot. So no guarantee as to when a critical real-time process will be scheduled. Some lateness can be tolerated. So if you have a number of processes and let's say 100, and then if 90 or 95 are meeting the deadlines, that's still okay. So it means if a process or part of a process misses the deadline, usefulness is not 0, but it is reduced. Okay. So examples of such, one popular example we encounter every day: transmission of audio and video frames over the internet. So you're watching a YouTube video, you're downloading this lecture, right? So what's happening is the video is stored on YouTube server. Your laptop or desktop or mobile phone is a client, and then these audio and video frames are being transmitted from YouTube server to your machine, right? Audio and video both, so they have to be in sync. Now if you have a good internet connection, everything will go well, very smooth. If there is some problem with the internet connection, then some of these frames, some of these packets, AV packets, could be dropped. So some of the frames could be lost. So there will be some break in continuity of the video. Now, how many of these frames are lost or dropped, while they're traveling the internet. That will have an effect on, how happy or unhappy the users are. If 5% of the packets are dropped, frames are dropped, well, not too bad. If 50% of the frames are dropped, then we have a problem. So in hard real-time systems, deadline misses are not tolerated at all, whereas in soft real-time systems, a limited amount of deadline misses can be tolerated. Okay. How much is limited? That depends on the system, depends on the application, depends on the users. Right? Some user may not tolerate even 5% drops. Right? Some may tolerate 10% also. 50% probably nobody will tolerate. So depends on perception also. So here, when we are processing real-time tasks in terms of the OS scheduling, we need to look at two kinds of latencies, delays. Right? Latency is delay. So one is interrupt latency, and the other one is dispatch latency. So what's happening is task T is running on the CPU, and then there's an interrupt. So let's say now another task has arrived. It's a dynamic system, and now we need to run that new task. So how that will happen? The events that will happen is task T is running, then an interrupt will be generated, either using the hardware or the software. Right. So we learned from chapter 1, interrupts can be generated both by hardware or by software. Right. So for hardware, there is a bus which CPU listens to for the signal. For software, an example could be system call. Right. So what happens is once you have the interrupt while T is running, you have to determine, or the operating system has to determine the type of interrupt. Right. That so there's an interrupt vector, if you recall, in chapter 1. So which is sort of a data structure which has an interrupt number and type of interrupt. So looking at that table, the OS has to determine what type of interrupt it is, and then it will see fine, this is what is happening is there's a new task that has arrived. So then we have to do a context switch, of course, as we learned in chapter 3, which means for the currently running task T, you have to save its context into its PCB or process control block. So which instruction it was executing, what was the value of registers, its whole context, its whole state has to be saved so that it can be reloaded later. So you do that, then you have a context switch, and then you have interrupt service routine which is processed. So which means you have an interrupt latency you need to take care of, time from arrival of interrupt to start of routine that services interrupt, and then you have the dispatch latency. Dispatcher we've learned earlier in this chapter, time for schedule to take current process off CPU and switch to the other. So the new process will be, let's say, in the ready queue, now you have to bring it in and assign it the CPU. So that is called the dispatch latency. Okay. So we have to say that both these latencies, interrupt latencies and dispatch latencies, have to be minimized. Right? They have to be as less as possible, because if the context switch time is too great, too high, well, then the process might start late and it might already miss its deadline no matter what you do. Right? So if by the time you do the context switch it's already T equal to 16, execution cost is 5, deadline is 20, so you miss it. So likewise, the interrupt latency also has to be minimized. It's easy to see that, because this, if it's too great, again it will lead to the task starting quite late, and if it starts after the cutoff time, which in our example is 15, then you will miss all deadlines. So bottom line here is both these latencies should be minimized. Okay. It is crucial for real-time operating systems to minimize interrupt latencies to ensure that real-time tasks receive immediate attention. Okay. In fact, not only should we minimize these latencies, if possible, we should bound them. Like saying, okay, fine, context switch will occur in 10 microseconds, fine, interrupt latency will be processed in 2 milliseconds. If we can bound that time, if we can give a guarantee, that is the best. Okay. Okay, now I am on slide number 4, priority based scheduling. Okay. So we learned about this priority based scheduling, and what is this all about? Well, in general, what this says is, based on some metric, based on some value, which we have for all the tasks, we assign a priority for each and every task or process. For example, in shortest job first, how are we assigning the priorities? Based on job length. So shorter is a job, higher will be its priority. Shortest job will get the highest priority, longest job will get the lowest priority. In preemptive SGF, which was SRTF, shortest remaining time first, priority is assigned looking at the shortest remaining time. Okay. So therefore, in real-time systems, whatever algorithms we discuss, they will also be priority based. Okay. So for real-time scheduling, we say scheduler must support preemptive priority-based scheduling. So preemptive means if a new task comes in which has a higher priority, we should preempt execution of the currently running task, or abort it, or sort of interrupt it. Interrupt is a better word, and then bring in the new task. Right, and then the one which we are interrupting will execute later. Okay. So for hard real-time systems, we have to provide ability to meet deadlines. So now we look at our task model. So we are looking at tasks or processes which are periodic, which means depending on the period, new versions or copies of the task keep arriving in the system. Which means if the period of a task is 5, let's say 5 milliseconds, then after every 5 milliseconds, a new copy or a new instance or a new invocation of that task arrives in the system. Okay. So one example could be like you have a sensor like that old, the one we just discussed, tracking enemy movement. So you have some kind of sensor, or if you have like a camera that is automatically capturing pictures or video. So it's capturing pictures. So the question is, how frequently should it capture pictures? So maybe after every second, let's say you decide. So every second you start capturing the picture. So capturing the picture becomes the process, becomes a task there. And at t equal to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you start capturing the picture. Right? So the period of that task is, capturing picture task is 1 second. And let's say the time it takes to take the picture is 400 milliseconds. So that is the execution cost. Okay. So this is a periodic model. Each task has a period P, it has a deadline D, it has a processing time, execution cost T. So here we will assume that the deadline of a task is at the end of its period, which means if the period is 5, first copy of the task comes when? At time t equal to 0. So period is 5, which means this copy has to be finished by time equal to 5. Because what will happen is at time equal to 5, second copy will come. So that deadline for that second copy is end of that period, which is 10. And then deadline for third copy is 15. Deadline for fourth copy is 20. So if the period is 5, the deadline of first, second, third copies are 5, 10, 15, 20. So we assume the deadline is at the end of the period. So generally, deadline is less than equal to period, which we are, so we are assuming here deadline is equal to period, not less than. Okay. Execution cost is less than equal to deadline. So we generally assume it's less than, just we're taking a simplistic model. Okay. So this shows a task in picture, it's a period is given. So, we have 3 copies, 3 invocations, and the execution cost is T, and deadline is given. So here deadline is earlier than the period. In our examples, we will assume deadline is equal to the period. So more simplistic model, because we have more time to finish the task. Okay. So as you can see, first copy of the task has to finish by the deadline. Second copy of the task has to finish by the deadline. Third copy of the task also has to finish by the deadline. Okay, so this is a task model, periodic task model. Okay. So now I am on slide 5, and now we just start discussing our first algorithm, which is called rate monotonic scheduling. Okay. So let's see what this algorithm is all about. So this is a static priority scheduling algorithm for real-time systems. So static priority means the priorities will be assigned in the beginning before generating the schedule, and the priorities for processes will remain constant throughout the schedule generation, which means they cannot change. Okay. So if I say I have 2 tasks, 2 processes, PA and PB, and I say PA has a higher priority than PB, so that situation will remain. It will always have a higher priority than PB for the generation of the schedule. Algorithm uses preemption, which means if we have a higher priority task which arrives, we interrupt the currently running task and execute the higher priority task. In both algorithms that we discussed today, we assume a single CPU for simplicity. So what is the key concept in this? Main intuition of this algorithm? The priority of a process is inversely proportional to its period. So lower the period, higher will be the priority. So let's say we have 2 tasks, period of one is 5, period of second is 10. So which means deadline for the first one task will be 5, deadline for the first will be 10. So generally deadline is equal to period, so one with the lower period will have a lower deadline. So intuition is lower is the period, higher should be the priority. We should execute it earlier, because the next copy of the task will come sooner if the period is smaller. Okay, that's the intuition. Explanation, lower period tasks will request the CPU more often, correct? So give them higher priority. So if a period is 5, the task will request the CPU at time 0, 5, 10, 15. If period is 10, CPU will be requested at 0, 10, 20, 30. So for first task, it is requesting the CPU more often with the one with the smaller period. So let's give it the priority, higher priority. So before the schedule is generated, the priorities are evaluated using the period values. Key feature here is that the priorities are static. They do not change during the execution of the algorithm. Okay, static priorities. So now let's take an example from the book for a schedule with 2 processes, 2 periodic processes. And I think in the book this is given on page 227 if I am not wrong, in the 9th edition. So we are taking using that same example. So let's look at that example and see, given the processes, how rate monotonic would schedule them. Okay. Okay, now I am on slide number 6. So here we are doing an illustrative example for rate monotonic. Okay. So we are given 2 tasks for which these are the parameters. The period of task 1 or process 1 is 50, and the period of task 2, process 2 is 100. So which process will have the higher priority among the two, P1 and or P2? It will be P1 because shorter period means higher priority. So what that means is, so what does higher priority mean here? Well, it simply means that if we are given a choice among executing both of these, we will always pick P1. If we don't have a choice anyway, then whichever one has to execute will execute. If there is no task to execute, well, nothing will be done. Execution costs are 20 for P1, 35 for P2. Right? And deadline is at the end of the period, which means for P1 it's 50, for P2 it's 100. So now we know that P1 gets a higher priority because it's got a lower period. So both at time t equal, now let's see the schedule at time t equal to 0. Both processes are in, we have to make a choice. So we pick which one? We pick P1. P1 runs, its execution cost is 20, so it finishes by time 20. And now we give the CPU to P2. So note the periods of the task, which means the new copy of the task will arrive. So for P1 copies arrive at 0, 50, 100, 150, 200. For P2 copies arrive at 0, 100, 200. Right? So that is what these arrows signify. Arrival of a fresh copy. So you can have a scenario in which a particular copy is running and a new one arrives. So you have to make a scheduling decision. So at time 20, P2 gets the CPU. Its execution cost is 35. So 20 and 35 is 55. But what happens is at time 50, the second copy of P1 arrives. Is P2 finished at time 50? It's not. Its execution cost is 35, only 30 units are finished. So how many units are left? 5. So now you have to make a scheduling decision. We make a scheduling decision between first copy of P2 and second copy of P1. Well, we know P1 has a higher priority. So now we preempt. We interrupt P2 and give the CPU to P1. P1 executes, P1 starts at 50, execution cost is 20, so finishes at 70. And now there is no task, so we finish the remaining chunk of P2, which was left, 5 units, starting at 70, ending at 75. Right? Clear? And now from 75 to 100, we have what we call idle time. Right? There is no task to execute because we assume P1 and P2 are the only processes that the CPU is executing. Now we wait till 100. Right? At 100 now, we have both P1 and P2 coming. 2 copies. So now P1 gets a CPU as usual, higher priority. Starts at 100, finishes at 120. 120 now, P2 gets the CPU, this copy. Second copy. 120 it starts and then it runs till 150. 30 units, still 5 are left, and at 150, third copy of P1 comes. So now scheduling decision between third copy of P1 and second copy of P2. P1 has absolute higher priority over P2, irrespective of which copy. So P1 preempts P2. P1 starts at 150, finishes at 170. And then 170, the 5 which was remaining from second copy of P2, it finishes. And then 200, same thing. So what we actually observe is that the same schedule is repeating after 100 time units. So actually that's one property. When you're given a set of processes and their periods, calculate the LCM, least common multiple. Right? And the property is that the schedule repeats after the LCM value. Okay. So schedule repeats after the LCM value. Okay. So here what's the LCM? It's 100. So you can see 0 to 100, whatever schedule we have, 0 to 100 and then 100 to 200. You see it's exactly the same. Alright. Process is starting similarly. P1 finishing, P2 being preempted, then P1 finishing, then remaining of P2 being executed. Right. So 2 copies of P1 being executed, 1 copy of P2. So this will repeat from 0 to 100, from 100 to 200, 200 to 300. Okay. So this is a schedule and we see that are the deadlines met. So for P1 first copy deadline is 50, it's met. For P2 first copy deadline is 100, it's met, finishes at 75. P1 second copy deadline is 100, finishes at 70. P1 third copy deadline 100, finishes at 120. P2 second copy deadline is 200, finishes at 175. And P1 fourth copy deadline is 200, finishes at 170. So all deadlines are met, right? 2 copies of P2 are executed, 1 copy of P1. So period is 50. So if you are observing for 200, then in 200 4 copies of P1 are released and 2 copies of P2 are released. So this is rate monotonic. I hope that this is clear. Okay. Okay. Now I am on slide 7, and here we look at scheduling scenario with a missed deadline while using rate monotonic. Okay. So here what we have is we change the values a little. Still 2 processes, still 1 CPU. Periods is 50 and 80. P1 is 50, P2 is 80. Execution costs are 25 for P1, 35 for P2. So once again, which process has the higher priority? Still P1, 50 is less than 80. And note its static priority. So the priorities are absolute. P1 will always have a higher priority than P2. So we start running at time T0. We've got both processes in the system. So which one we pick? P1, the higher priority process. So P1 starts, finishes at time T equal to 25. 25 now P2 gets a chance. Execution cost is 35, right? So it runs till 50. So which means how many units of P2 have run till time T equal to 50? It starts at 25, so till 50, 25 units. So how many are remaining for P2? How many units are remaining for P2? 10, right? So at time T equal to 50 now we have to make a choice between P2 and P1. First copy of P2, second copy of P1. Well, P1 has a higher priority always. So P2 is preempted. P1 runs and P1 starts at 50, execution cost is 25, so it finishes at 75. 75 P2 gets the CPU starts running. Now period is 80. So at 80, second copy of P2 comes. So P2 and P2 we can pick any one. We pick the older one. So what happens is it has 5 more units and it starts at 75, finishes at 85. So what's the problem here? What was the deadline for P2? End of the period was 80, so deadline was 80. So obviously P2 has missed the deadline. Deadline was 80, it should have finished by 80, but it finishes at 85, which means it has missed the deadline by 5 units. So here's a case in which rate monotonic is not able to guarantee a deadline meeting. So there is a deadline miss. So we can think, why was the deadline missed? Well, if you think about it, at time t50, you have to make a decision between P1 and P2. So second copy of P1, what was its deadline? 100. First copy of P2, what was its deadline? 80. So which seems to suggest for P2 the deadline was nearer. So preempting P2, interrupting P2 and giving the CPU to P1 was a bad decision. Okay. So once again, at time t50, you had two processes to consider: P1 with a deadline of 100 because it's a second copy, and P2 deadline of 80 because it's a first copy. And what we did was, even though P2 had an earlier deadline, we still gave the CPU to P1 because it had a higher priority, smaller period. Okay, so that was a bad choice. Okay. So I hope it's clear how rate monotonic works, and why we had a missed deadline. So this intuition brings us to our next algorithm, that what if we change the priorities dynamically. So if at time 50 we are saying P2 has an earlier deadline, why don't we assign P2 a higher priority than P1? So what we have here is dynamic priority changing. So we're changing the priorities, they are not fixed, no longer fixed, based on the situation. Okay. So just because P1 had a higher priority than P2 in the beginning doesn't mean that will always be the case. Depending on the situation, reverse can also happen. P2 can have a higher priority than P1 also. So our next algorithm is one which changes the process priorities dynamically at runtime. Okay. Okay, so we are on slide 8 now, and now we discuss our second algorithm, EDF, or earliest deadline first. Okay. So here is a similar model. Periodic processes, deadline at the end of the period. The key concept here is the priorities are assigned based on the deadline values. Okay. Based on the deadline values. So a smaller deadline means a higher priority. So you're evaluating two tasks. The one with the smaller deadline will have the higher priority and will be picked first. And the priority assignment is dynamic, which means the priority can change during the course of execution. Preemption is of course there. So now we look at an example again from the book. I think it's given on page 228 and 229 of the textbook. So using a set of processes, we'll see how EDF, for earliest deadline first, schedules them. So intuitively it should make sense. Process with small deadline versus a process with large deadline. The small deadline should go first because it has lesser time to finish execution. Okay. So let's look at earliest deadline first now. Okay, now I am on slide 9, and here we are doing a illustrative example of earliest deadline first. So we have two processes. Process P1, period 50, execution cost 25, deadline end of the period, so 50. P2, period 80, execution cost 35, deadline end of the period 80. So which process has a higher priority? It's P1. Why? Because it has a earlier deadline. Note that this is initial priority. So to begin with, initially priority for P1 is higher than for P2. So these priorities can, and as we'll see, will change. So we start at time 0, both can run, and we give it to P1. Starting at 0, P1 finishes at 25. Now only P2 is available, so we give the CPU to P2. To give the CPU means we pick it from the ready queue and it's dispatched to the CPU and it can start execution. So 25 P2 starts, execution cost is 35, and at time 50 we may have to make our next scheduling decision. So anytime a new task arrives, we have to make a scheduling decision. So now the decision is between first copy of P2 and second copy of P1. So now we look at the deadlines. What is the deadline for the first copy of P2? Right? So first copy of P2 deadline we can see is 80. And for second copy of P1, deadline is it arrived at 50. So end of the period is 50, so deadline is 100. So for first copy of P2, deadline is 80. For second copy of P1, deadline is 100. Which means, this is important, no preemption. So unlike in the earlier case, now we don't preempt P2. So for this particular case, the priority of P2 is higher than P1. So this is what we mean by dynamic priorities. So which means that P2 continues. It started at 25, so it finishes at reaches 35 units. So 35, 25, 60, right? 25 plus 35, 60. So at 60, P2 finishes. Now second version of P1 starts at 60. And at 80 now we again have to make a decision, because at 80 we have the second copy of P2 which has arrived. So now the decision is, scheduling decision is between second copy of P2 and second copy of P1. So again, what are the deadlines? Second copy of P2, deadline is 160. Second copy of P1, deadline is 100. So since 100 is less than 160, P1 now gets a higher priority. So you can see how the priorities are changing. Initially P1 is higher, then at time 50 P2 is higher, then at time 80 again P1 is higher. So P1 continues, it started at 60, right? Execution cost is 25, so it finishes at 85. Now we give it to P2 starting at 85, and its execution cost is 35. Now at its P2 is running, so at 100 now we have to make another scheduling decision, right? So you can see that there is not much of a difference in the task periods, 50 and 80. So which means we have to make scheduling decisions quite rapidly, or a larger number of times, right? So at 100 now the scheduling decision is between second copy of P2 with a deadline 160 and third copy of P1 with a deadline 150. So 150 is less than 160, so P1 gets a higher priority, which means we preempt P2. P1 runs 100 to 125. 125 P2 picks up the previous version, second copy. So previous version had started at 85, so at 100 it had executed 15, execution cost is 35, so 20 are left. So at 125 it starts, 145 it ends. And then P1 and P2 again arrive. So this is the schedule, for earliest deadline first. Okay. So this would repeat till the LCM of 50 and 80. Which is 400. So we're not, although it would be a good exercise, you can draw the schedule till 400, which will be a good extension for you. And then after 400 the schedule will repeat. So now here we are seeing, taking the same task set, for which rate monotonic had missed the deadline, but earliest deadline first guarantees it. Because here, unlike rate monotonic, the priorities are dynamic and they're based on the deadline. So at 50 it recognized, although initially P1 had a higher priority, but it recognized that P2 deadline for that is 80, whereas for P1 second version, second copy, it's 100. So we should change the priorities and P2 should get a higher one than P1. So whenever it needs to make a scheduling decision, it examines all the processes and it sees whichever one has the lowest deadline, gives it to that. So of course here we have two processes. It's easy to extend this to three processes. So with three, you have to compare three of them. Pick the one with the lowest. Right? Anytime we make a scheduling decision, pick the process with the lowest deadline. Okay. So here we are making the scheduling decisions at time 0. So scheduling decision means whenever we have more than one process that wants to run and we have to pick from them, because that's what the scheduling algorithm is. Given multiple processes in the ready queue, how do you pick which one is will get the CPU? So scheduling decision at 0. There is no scheduling decision at 25 because it's obvious we give it to P2. Again, scheduling decision at P1. Scheduling decision at scheduling decision at 50. Scheduling decision at 80, then 100, then 150, then 160. So whenever we have more than one process to choose from, that's when we make a scheduling decision, and that's when we pick whichever process has a smaller deadline. So in this case, this is how earliest deadline first will schedule these processes. So I hope it is clear, right? Okay, now I am on slide 10 where we discuss the EDF schedulability condition. So the statement we are making is EDF is an optimal algorithm, which means that if it is possible to given a set of processes with certain execution costs and certain periods, if it is possible to come up with a schedule in which all deadlines are met, then EDF can come up with that schedule. If it's not possible, then obviously any algorithm in the world cannot come up with the schedule. So the main expression is the algorithm guarantees that all deadlines will be met even if CPU utilization is 1. So what is the utilization of a task? Its execution cost divided by its period. So which means the total utilization has to be less than or equal to 1. Okay. So we can calculate in the previous case. Let me just pull this out. Let's see, where's a pen? Yeah. So we had two processes, right? And P1 and P2. The periods were for P1 it was 50, right? For P2 it was 80. 50, 80. Execution costs were I'm just looking 25 for P1, 35 for P2. 25 and 35. So for P1 execution cost 25, period 50. For P2 execution cost 35, period 80. So how do we calculate the utilization? We divide execution cost by period. So utilization for process 1 is 25 by 50. Utilization for process 2 is 35 by 80. So for P1 it's 50%. That which makes sense, because if you just consider P1, first copy arrives at 0, second copy arrives at 50. So if P1 is only one executing, it gets the CPU, finishes at 25, and then 25 to 50 the CPU is idle, which means what's the utilization? How by what percentage was P1 able to keep the CPU utilized? 50% from 0 to 25. 25 to 50 is idle time, right? So 50%. For UP2, for process 2, it's 35 by 80, right? Which is, if I calculate, it's about 43, so it's 43.75%. So if I add both of these, 93.75%. So which is less than 1. And like that you can, experiment, play around with different combinations, different utilizations. You can even play around with utilization of 1, right? So for example, if period of P is 50, if execution cost is 25, and period 2 for P2, period is 80, execution cost is 40. So keeping period same, 50 and 80, keep the execution cost 25 and 40 respectively. So 25 by 50 is 50%, 40 by 80 is also 50%, add them 100%. So you will see, even in this case, earliest deadline first guarantees all deadlines are met, which is really good, because if the utilization goes over 100, no algorithm can guarantee it that deadlines will be met, because your load will be more than what the CPU provides. CPU provides 100%, and if your load is greater than 100%, let's say 35 by 50 plus 40 by 80, right? 35 by 50 plus 40 by 80, that's over 100%. So deadlines will definitely be missed. But as such, if the total utilization is less than or equal to 1, all deadlines will be met. So there is quite a long proof for this, which we will not cover, but we do need to remember this result. If the combined utilization of all processes is less than or equal to 1, earliest deadline first will guarantee that all process deadlines are met. Of course, this is a theoretical value. It's actually ignoring the context switching costs which are there. If you add context switching, then it will not be 1, it will be a bit less than 1. How less depends on how many processes, how many context switches. So it's a bit hard to come up with that expression. So just to keep things a bit simple, we ignore context switching costs. So we have to remember this expression. Okay. So now I am on slide 11, and we will do one tutorial problem on real-time scheduling. So here we will be using the utilization result of EDF, earliest deadline first, which says that the combined utilization, or the sum of ratios of execution costs and periods for all jobs should be less than or equal to 1. So here we have a real-time system that needs to handle 2 voice calls that each run every 5 milliseconds and consume 1 millisecond of CPU time per burst. So period is 5 and execution cost is 1. So that is for each call. So we have 2 of them. Plus one video at 25 frames per second. So we have video frames, with each frame requiring some computation, which is 20 milliseconds of CPU time. Okay, so time to process each frame. Is the system schedulable such that all the deadlines are met? So 3 processes we have in the system. 2 are voice calls. Execution costs for each voice call is 1 millisecond, right? And they occur after every 5 milliseconds. And then we have a video, right? A video call at 25 frames per second, with each frame requiring 20 milliseconds of CPU time. Is the system schedulable such that all deadlines are met? So what we will need to do here is, the way we approach this is, we have to try to see you know how busy all these three processes, you know, can make the CPU. So how busy will the CPU be, single CPU, you know, if it executes all of these three processes from start to finish. And then we have to see that you know, it is less than equal to 100%. So that's a general approach. So now I am on slide 12, which shows the solution. So we handle both of them separately. Let's look at the video call. 25 frames are transmitted or generated per second. Each frame needs 20 milliseconds of CPU time. So total load per second, right? Total load per second is 25 into 20. So we know that in 1 second 25 frames are generated. Each frame needs 20 milliseconds of CPU time. So in 1 second total CPU load for this video call is 25 into 20, which is 500 millisecond. Yeah, that's clear. So straight away we can say that there's 50% utilization. If you are analyzing the system for 1 second, which is 1000 milliseconds, utilization is 50%. Let's look at the audio calls. Each call runs every 5 milliseconds and needs 1 millisecond of CPU time. So one way we can approach this is, how many calls do we have in 1 second? So we have 1000 milliseconds. A single call generates after every 5 milliseconds. So in 1000 milliseconds we'll have 200 of them. And we have two such calls. So we have 400 of these calls. 400 of these calls in 1 second. Okay, numbers may not be a bit very realistic, but let's just go with it. So 400 calls. Each call we know needs 1 millisecond. So total CPU load due to all the audio calls, all the copies, is because 400 such calls, so 400 milliseconds. So this is for 1 second again. We want to keep the time scale same. So therefore the utilization due to the audio calls is 400 by 1000, 40%. 50% plus 40%, total utilization is 90%, which is less than 100, so system is schedulable. So total load placed by the system, you know, all of these calls is 900, 500 millisecond plus 400 milliseconds, 900 milliseconds. Time available is 1000 milliseconds. So, you know, all deadlines will be met, and plus we will have 100 milliseconds spare or idle CPU time. Because we are directly using the result of earliest deadline first, if the total utilization, right, of all the processes is less than equal to 1, less than equal to 100%, the system is schedulable, all deadlines are met. So we are directly using that formula, that result. Utilization, if we are so we are keeping the time scale same for both, that is 1 second. So for the video call, the utilization in 1 second is 50%, right? 500 millisecond by 1000 millisecond, 50%. For the audio calls, the utilization is 40%, 400 millisecond by 1000 millisecond. So in a 1 second duration, total utilization due to the single video call and the two audio calls is 90%. So less than 100, so system is schedulable. Okay, so I hope, you know, this problem is clear.